hate Edinburgh.
Ah yes, Edinburgh, capital city of Scotland. Home to terrible bagpipers, scandalously tacky tartan souvenirs, and the highest ratio of idiotic tourists to locals that you're going to find anywhere outside of Barcelona. Oh yeah, they do have an old castle and cobbled streets and charming alleyways and all that kind of thing as well, but we don't really need to talk anymore about all of that. They get more than enough fawning coverage from travel magazines as it is. Something else that Edinburgh is known for is playing host to what is apparently the world's largest arts festival, called the Fringe. This essentially involves the entire city being taken over for the full month of August by even more tourists, the ancient walls plastered with posters for mediocre free comedy shows, and the streets filled with slight variations of the man on stilts juggles fire trope. I can't tell you how many of these I've seen by this point. As a long-term resident of Scotland's largest city, Glasgow, I am honour bound to decry Edinburgh and everything that it stands for.
Damn Scots!
However, over the past couple of years, I have to admit that I've softened a bit towards the city, perhaps largely because the Fringe provides an excellent opportunity to take some street photographs. I did something similar last year, where I took full advantage of the fact that you can legally drink alcohol in the city streets to get ever so slightly inebriated, and took a whole load of pictures with my Leica M2. That ended up actually being one of the last times that I shot film, because the results were, well, rather shite. Failures aside, there are usually some interesting characters kicking about the Fringe, which makes it well worth the trip, including this guy that I bumped into called Christian, who was over from New York. He'd come to put on a show as part of the festival, and he said that I was the only Scottish person he had met in Edinburgh. I told him that I wasn't surprised. Over the past couple of weekends, I've headed through to Edinburgh to soak up the heady atmosphere and even attend some shows. This included one called Coma, where we were locked in a pitch black shipping container designed to simulate an abusive doctor-patient relationship in a kind of trippy psychedelic scenario. On top of that, I attended the rather manic Trainspotting Live, where I was splashed by water from a toilet by a completely naked grown man. I didn't get any footage of that for obvious reasons, but I did manage to capture some of the roaming silent disco. Not quite sure which one of those was worse. My plan for these trips had been that I would do some kind of street photo vlog like the recent one that I uploaded from Glasgow with my pal Lee, but unfortunately my companions Brian and Al were not especially keen on participation.
Private individual, no YouTube appearances.
I thought I might have better luck with my lovely wife, but she also made her feelings on the matter clear.
Okay, no, I will take that camera and throw it on the floor.
As a result, you're stuck with this rather droll voiceover. Now, as is typical for a Scottish summer, the weather veered from unbearably hot to pneumonia-inducing downpours, and rather predictably, we were caught completely off guard with none of the waterproof clothing that we owned on hand.
How much do you think an umbrella would be?
I'm going to buy one, I don't care. Instead, we were forced to buy overpriced, poor quality umbrellas from a tourist shop on the Royal Mile, more to our shame.
Oh, hi. Sorry for giving you a fright there. This is what Stephen looks like today.
It's not a Gore-Tex jacket.
I've got my finger in it, it's so wide I've got my finger in the shot there.
You never need to provide a Scottish person with an excuse to take a drink, so we sought shelter from the rain in a local establishment that claimed to offer beer and pizza. Well, it was meant to provide beer, but apparently every pub in Edinburgh was suffering some kind of draft drought throughout the Fringe, which rendered the choice on offer extremely limited. Later on in the day, this frustration was compounded when I witnessed a confused Australian trying and failing to order dinner, where they were told that first there was no pies, and then there was no beer, and then, most insultingly of all, no fish and chips. No fish and chips in a Scottish pub, in the capital city. I love Edinburgh, it's the best city in Scotland. Despite my rather cynical commentary, I did actually enjoy milling around taking pictures with the Lumix GX9 and Leica 15mm f1.7 combination. I may not have captured anything particularly groundbreaking or even half decent, to be honest, but American tourists and eccentric English thespians who are just desperate to promote their flagging shows are far less likely to punch you in the face if you do take their picture without asking for permission, which is a refreshing contrast to my home city of Glasgow. As I traversed the sacred streets of Edinburgh, I slipped into a dangerous state of reflection. This is a city that is only 45 minutes away from Glasgow on the train. The journey costs about 15 quid, which is around about the same price as a taxi home after a drunken night out in the town. Less, actually, if you include the obligatory 4 AM kebab. Despite that, there is this Glaswegian blind spot when it comes to the capital. Sure, there are plenty of things to hate about it, I grant you that, but I can't help but wonder if we're missing a trick somewhere. In many ways, I definitely take Edinburgh and the Fringe for granted. It's just always been there, a minor figure of ridicule and contempt. But people do come from all over the world and pay exorbitant prices for Airbnbs the size of electrical cupboards just to experience a tiny bit of it. As I've gotten older, I've explored the city more and increasingly found wee nooks and crannies that I genuinely really love, or at least have some kind of affection for. Dingy basements and dimly lit cocktail bars filled with some really brilliant people. As I increasingly hurtle towards infirmity, incapacity and irrelevance, I've been thinking a lot about being more present and deliberate with life, not taking things for granted, even and especially when I can't be arsed. In some ways, Edinburgh and the Fringe are the perfect symbols of the kind of complacency that I want to avoid. Something pretty amazing that has become kind of invisible purely due to their constant presence in my life. Despite going to more of the Fringe than usual this year, I still don't really feel like I've made the most of it, and I'm wondering if I'll ever be able to shake that feeling now after decades of neglect. Well, I guess there's always next year.